Last week, I got to fly to Quebec City, Canada to play Assassin's Creed Shadows early. I got to tour the studio, talk with developers, and play nearly 6 hours of this game, so I'm really excited to jump in and talk about it. Before we do, quick thanks to Ubisoft for flying me out to play this game early. Before we get down to business, a few disclaimers on this preview. First off, I played the prologue of the game from the very beginning, but I'm not allowed to talk about it, and they didn't even let us record it. And then if you're worried about spoilers, I don't go over specific plot details like how we get from point A to point B to point C, but I do show the final mission of this narrative arc because I think it's important to the preview. I will give a little heads up before we get into spoiler territory, but if you're just very sensitive to spoilers, I probably wouldn't watch this video. Again, I played from the very beginning of the game, but the part I'm allowed to show you is where they skip us forward like really far. At this point, Naoe and Yasuke are level 25. They dropped us into the Harima region of the map, which is in the bottom left, one of the 9 zones in the game. And that was the only place we were allowed to explore. There were actually some barriers that I can't show you guys, but of course those barriers were only for the preview. They're not going to be in the full game, but I was kind of surprised by how restrictive this preview felt compared to previous ones. Nevertheless, the main mission we were given is called the Rengakai, and this is involving one of the main targets in the game called the Noble. But like any self-respecting AC player, I ignored that and went to the first viewpoint that I saw, which is on top of this Tenshu near Himeji Castle. And as you can tell, this world is absolutely gorgeous, and something that really stuck out to me is the terrain in this game is very different than any other AC. Talking to creative director Jonathan Dumont, he told me that was a big focus for them to make sure this terrain was accurate to Japan. Japan is very mountainous, and you're not going to see very long stretches of distance without having it obscured by a mountain. Same goes for the forest. He told me that the land is 80% natural, which meant that they had to create these densely packed areas of trees that, again, I just had not seen before, and it kind of surprised me. At the top of this Tenshu, I got to experience the new Observe system. So once again, they got rid of the recon bird from previous games. You can't use that anymore for recon or for finding new locations. Instead, they encourage you to climb and use your character's perspective to find new locations to go. And so I found this interesting question mark, I marked it, and then moved on my way. Something to note, this doesn't reveal what the location is. It just reveals that there is something interesting there. So it's more reliant on the player to seek that out. Like, does this look interesting? Okay, I'll go check it out. Here's where I did my first leap of faith, and as you can see, it's very smooth with Naoe. As was the parkour here. Now, I'm showing you this short clip, but you'll see plenty of parkour in this video. I think I started kind of herky-jerky because, like most games, there's a learning curve, and you can't just hold RTA the whole time to climb. When I hit the ground, I got a little reaction from the crowd around me, these people standing around, which was kind of cool, a little bit of reactivity with the world. And on the other side of the street, people are talking about Lord Hashiba Hideyoshi, which is one of the central figures in the story. You'll see more of it in this video, but I was pleasantly surprised by how populated the village seemed, and the people seemed lively, you know, like they were going to and from places in a way that I didn't really see in Valhalla. Moving along, I found this Himeji guild storage area, which I think you can basically call a camp. You know, a camp that you would clear in a classic Ubisoft game. It's got some treasures, it's got some enemies. If you clear it, you get a little reward for that. And playing as Naoe, I wanted to do this in stealth, so I parkoured up to a position and used Observe and Classic Eagle Vision to mark targets and see what I was working with. I noticed this camp had a bell, so I decided to sabotage that, but the noise of the bell falling down got the attention of this enemy. I didn't realize it because I was planning my next move. Lo and behold, he climbed the ladder to look at me, and I actually got detected. I think I actually would have been safe if I did this mission at night, which makes a huge difference with the new Shadows system, which we'll talk about later. I was able to go back into stealth and escape this guy's attention just by going prone. He kind of forgot about me and then went back to his post. I parkoured my way along the rooftops and assassinated this one guard who wasn't paying attention to me. I was trying to get to this samurai for an assassination, and I bumped into this crate, and I think the noise is what gave me away. So a big takeaway with stealth is sound matters. Like, if you're going to cut down a bell or bump into a crate, be prepared to get detected. So this is my first taste of combat and what I'm allowed to show you, and guys, I pretty much got my butt beat. It was really difficult for me with Naoe. As you can see, I'm able to dodge several unblockable attacks from this elite samurai, but Once you get hit really hard with her. And the difference between her and Yasuke is she cannot block attacks at all. She has to dodge or parry. So unless you're really skilled or you've got a lot of playtime in this game, I think it's going to be difficult when you're being attacked by 3 people like I am in this clip. But to even the odds, I had access to this trip ability, which is just a base Naoe ability that she has as a shinobi. She can use it with any weapon, and it just puts the enemy on the ground for a ground attack. Feeling overwhelmed, I switched to the Kasaragama, which I tried to use, but again, my attacks were being interrupted. It was just overwhelming. So eventually, I decided to run. Now you can tell other guards noticed me and started chasing me, but really, I broke line of sight, did a little bit of parkour, and then hopped in the river and dove down. Just waited it out, and I disappeared. It absolutely is possible to have that classic loop of getting detected, then disappearing, and then re-engaging if you want to. And from here, I want to show you some uninterrupted just running and parkour gameplay here to give you a sense of how fast Naoe is. She climbs and runs and jumps and just navigates this world so much quicker than certainly the Valhalla characters, but even Basim and AC Mirage. So if you're someone who thought those games felt slow to navigate, Naoe is certainly the answer there. At this point, I decided enough messing around, let's actually do the main quest. So I talked to the Ranga Master, who led me into Hajime Castle to meet some of the other main characters in this arc. And here you get to see the dialogue system in action. It's slightly different from previous games. In all of the experience that I've had, I've only ever had 2 options, and they both move like the plot of the cutscene forward. There are some choices that you can make, but by and large, this is just like flavor text filler if you want to guide the conversation in a certain direction. I asked the associate narrative director, Brooke Davies, about choice and consequence, and like, is there going to be impactful choices in this game? She did say there would be, but I didn't get the impression that was a core part of the dialogue. Like, in very special situations, we'll be able to make some choices and maybe see the consequences of those actions. Compared to Assassin's Creed Valhalla or even Odyssey, for example, it felt like the cutscenes in this game were less just going back and forth between talking characters and more about like framing shots and giving you something that felt more cinematic. And that's my personal preference. I liked what I saw, and we actually talked to some of the people who worked on the cinematics in this game, and they told us that they definitely took inspiration from Japanese film and different media for framing these shots and kind of setting the scene. I will say this game feels very cutscene heavy. Like, once you get locked into a story or a cutscene, you're gonna sit there and watch like a 2 to 3 minute cutscene that's very dense in dialogue and details. And for me, it was a bit hard to follow. I blame that more on the preview than the game itself, though, because we were jumped so far ahead and introduced to like 5 new characters, and it was just kind of a lot to take in. Further along, you have to fight off some attackers during one of these cutscenes, and I got some more time with Naoe's combat. She has a katana ability called Tidal Wave that deals a little bit of extra damage and also leaves enemies open for vulnerable attacks. These are the ones you see where enemies grow a little bit yellow, and if you do a posture attack, which is holding either light or heavy attack, you'll deal some bonus damage if it hits. After each mission, the game gives you the choice to continue playing as Yasuke or Naoe. So, for example, if I played as Yasuke during that mission, I could have switched at the end as well. Up to this point, I really hadn't explored the pause menu, so I did and learned a bit about the progression in this game, which revolves around what's called knowledge and mastery. Knowledge is a currency that you get for completing activities in the game. Once you do, you'll get that knowledge point, which you can then spend on mastery. Mastery is just a fancy term for skill trees in this game, and Naoe, for example, has 6 of them. 3 trees are dedicated to her weapons, and then you've got a dedicated one for her tools, being a shinobi, and then being an assassin. Now, these have all kinds of different nodes in them. Some of them are passive abilities, like increasing your damage with the katana. Others are active abilities, like being able to slow down time when you're detected. Then you have passives that modify existing abilities, like being able to vault over enemies after you deflect. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, but generally speaking, this approach feels very Odyssey to me. Just different trees for very specific things. They always give you the option to refund your knowledge points. So if you don't like the way your kit is working, you can retool it for the specific situation you're in. And yeah, I certainly prefer this approach because I can specifically choose what I want without having to go through different constellation points like we did in Valhalla. Moving along, the end of the intro mission for this arc of the story gave us 2 more leads in order to track down the noble. I chose to question the wife of someone who was just at this attack. Similar to the exploration mode in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, this game is going to give you a set of clues so you can find where this person is on your own. It's not going to tell you exactly. However, there is a system that helps you with that to narrow down the searching range, and that's where the scouts come in. By using those clues, I figured this is about where this person's wife is going to be. So I use one of my scouts to narrow down the search range to this blue area. And it turns out, yes, I was correct. They're around this area. And I was told you don't have to use this system at all, but it is at your disposal if you want it. I was already playing as Naue, which feels perfect for this mission because it's nighttime and that makes stealth easier. So I parkoured into position, jumped down to a safe area, and then grabbed this guy while nobody was looking, dragged him into the bush to assassinate. And then because Naue is so small, she can actually go prone. There's small areas underneath houses that you can get underneath in order to infiltrate. So I popped up, skulked around, found this massive guy that I could get a corner assassination on, and found my target. I learned that her husband is a gambler and he could be found at a local gambling den, so that's our next objective. This led me to the same guild storage area that I failed to clear earlier, but this time I had the knight on my side, so I could take this down easier. First, I climbed to the roof and tagged everyone with eagle vision and observe. Then I took down these 2 guards with assassinations without being seen. I love how smooth and quick her assassinations are, by the way. The animation is so much quicker than the last couple games. But then I came across this massive elite enemy. Now, I could not one-shot assassinate this guy. There is an option in the menu to turn on all one-hit assassinations if that's something you want to do. In my case, I didn't have that on and my hidden blade power level wasn't high enough, so I couldn't do it. Instead, I dealt massive damage, then he kicked me in the head and threw his kanabo at me and took my health down to almost nothing. And then to add insult to injury, he healed himself up. So I was pretty mad at this point. And here is where you get to see the Tonto in action. This is one of Naue's weapons she can use, and she pairs it with the hidden blade. So we've got hidden blade combat back in the game. I used my kick ability to throw this guy on the ground and then just whittle away his armor, of which he has a ton. And an easy way to do this is to do a charged heavy posture attack, and that'll take away a bunch of it. Next, I use a Tonto ability called Shadow Piercer, where you throw your Tonto and then you run up and grab it and then use your hidden blade for an attack. And this leaves enemies vulnerable. It opens them up for a massive attack for even more damage. Unfortunately, the tides of battle turned against me because I got hit by several unblockable attacks in a row and got boxed into a corner trying to dodge away and just died. I wanted to show you this because I think it illustrates Naue's playstyle. It's very glass cannon. Like, make a couple of mistakes, you're dead. But you can deal a lot of damage if you do a lot of things right. I got my revenge when I came back and faced this different elite enemy, and I wanted to note here, the more I used the active abilities, the more I felt they were fine. That was one of my concerns coming into the game, was like, I don't like how the game pauses everything around you to do this flashy move. It's gonna get old. I actually found myself relying on them because of how difficult I found Naue's combat, and that may be the same for you. It may be different. You may be better than me, but that's how I found it. Eventually, I found my target, which is this naked guy, and he straight up bolted, so I had to chase him down and question him until I got the information that I needed. After this, I noticed an assassin icon nearby, so I went to my map and unlocked this area, and it turns out this is a remote hideout, and apparently these are in the major cities of the game. You can do a lot of stuff here. You can fast travel here, you can use your storage to drop off items or get ones out. You can also manage your contracts, which are little missions that refresh after every season. And then you could also manage your allies. I didn't notice that when I first visited this one, but we'll look at that a little bit later. At this point, I had one more lead on my main quest, and I had not played as Yasuke in the open section of this preview, so this is how you switch characters. You just pause, hold X, wait through a loading screen, and then I'm Yasuke. It's as easy as that. On the way to my next objective, I found this shrine. It just popped up, so I decided to go explore it. And these are interesting. The objective here is to find 3 different locations to pray at. So you have to find the shrines within this area to complete it and get the knowledge point. Now, maybe I just have ADHD gamer brain, but to me, I was like, is this it? Is this really what we're considering an activity? And I think some people will find this like authentic and respectful, but some people might find it a little boring. But I think it overall speaks to the direction of this game, which is very much grounded in the setting and the culture. Like, this is what people would do in Japan, so this is what you're going to do. As I was looking for the shrines, I ran into this little girl who said the Ronin killed her mother, and so I got a side quest to kill 25 Ronin. This was a little disappointing to me because I was expecting a scripted side quest where I get revenge specifically on one Ronin, but it's one of those progress, quests that you take a long time to finish and eventually you'll kill 25. This was a trend I noticed throughout the preview, and I actually asked the game director, Charles Benoit, about this, and he did say that there are scripted side quests, just maybe not in this preview. And he actually went further and explained there's over 100 quests in this game. So it's not that these don't exist, it's that they were not in this preview version of the game, which is kind of a shame. I wish I saw those. However, there is an activity you can do anywhere where you find wildlife, and it's Japanese ink brush painting. It's called sumie. And so sometimes in the world, you'll have like a little icon pop up, and that'll let you know that there's wildlife nearby that you can sneak up to. And if you get close enough without scaring them, you'll draw a little painting of them. Then you can take this painting and put it in your hideout, and it also gives you a little gameplay buff for a limited time. But again, this is more of a vibey activity, It's like stacking the cairnstones in Valhalla, but way less frustrating. It's something that feels authentic and respects the world. Like, you can't even kill animals in this game. You can't pull out a gun and shoot a deer because the Japanese don't do that. So again, I think this will be hit or miss for people. They'll find this boring or they'll find this interesting. On to the objective, I got to the old port of Aga and talked to this character who told me there's some suspicious merchants nearby and I had to deal with them. So I walked up to these guys and I could have straight up assassinated the leader. I decided to give them a chance and talk to them, but very quickly we got into combat. Compared to Naoe, Yasuke is so much more like methodical and careful, and I think that just more suits my play style. I was able to get a couple parries. One of these enemies threw a flurry attack at me, which is these glowing bright blue attacks where you have to parry all of them. I managed to do that, which opens them up for a vulnerable attack for bonus damage. If you played Odyssey, the Spartan kick is back, so Yasuke can launch guys, halfway across the area. And then he's got this really cool sheath attack that teleports you towards your enemy for massive damage as well, and then opens them up for a vulnerable. This whole time you've been watching the long katana gameplay, which is Yasuke's main weapon, but I also have the Teppo rifle, so I decided to pull that out and finish off the last guy very easy. At this point, Yasuke said something about using a boat to get to the next objective, and so I was looking around forever for a boat I could actually use, and I couldn't find one. I don't know if that was a glitch or not, but I decided to dive underneath the water because I used Observe and noticed a treasure under there. So if you were used to the way that items were ranked, like in most RPGs like Odyssey had, that is back. You've got like uncommon, rare, legendary, common. My objective led me to this temple, which was full of enemies. And since I was Yasuke, I didn't worry about being stealthy. I noticed these red barrels, so I backed up, shot them, and look at the explosion in this game. Something about it felt like hyper realistic in a way that I hadn't noticed before in these games. I used that again to take out most of this other group before going 1v1 with this big guy. A cool little detail I noticed earlier, when you break enemy armor, it's not just the health bar that disappears, but also it falls off of their body, so it like breaks off. It's kind of cool. Just to show you how strong Yasuke is, if there's an unarmored enemy and they only have one health bar, you can do one heavy attack and just clean chop their head off. It's brutal. I was looking for clues for my objective, then I ran into this guy who I had to brutally assassinate. This is what it looks like to assassinate someone with Yasuke. He doesn't have a hidden blade. He's just going to use whatever weapon that you have currently equipped. Further along in this fight, I decided to call one of my allies. So what you do is hold the left trigger, and then you have an option in the bottom right, and they have a little bird call, a sound cue associated with them when you call them, and each one is unique, which is a cool detail. This ally's name is Yaya, and her role is to bully people. She comes in and pushes them around and takes aggro away from you. The devs were saying she's particularly useful as Naoe because she's a big body in the fight and she takes, attention away from you. But I found that to be super useful as Yasuke as well. And then when the fight's over, she's like, that's a worthy fight, and then just sprints off. I thought this was funny. As I was looking for clues for my main objective, I noticed this temple, the activity here is to find lost scrolls, but these are on roofs, and Yasuke is not very good at climbing. So I did try to parkour with him, and you can see some of that gameplay here, but he's so heavy that he breaks a rope if you try to run across it. I don't know if I just didn't find the proper path, or if these activities are only doable with Naoe, which is kind of weird. It'd be weird to go to a location in a game and be like, I can't do this as this character, I have to switch to another character, but maybe that's the intended function of this area. There were a ton more enemies around this area, so I decided to try out the Kanabo, which is a big bat. And guys, this thing is so powerful. It's very high risk, high reward, but it just knocks the heads off of your enemies. It's absolutely brutal. And then I tested out another function of Yasuke's kit, which is that he can switch weapons mid-combo. So I decided to start with my katana and then finish off a combo with a kanabo, and that really works. That might be like a high-level way to play Yasuke. The next part of this quest ended up in a boss fight with this shinobi, and I decided to check out the Naginata, and it feels like more of a crowd control kind of weapon option for Yasuke. One of the abilities is this massive twirl attack that will knock enemies back, and if they hit objects, it'll do even more damage. I hopped on my horse and headed to the objective, and I ran across these Ronin, at least I think they were Ronin, just this wandering group of guys. I was thinking maybe they would attack me, but they didn't. So I decided to do a brutal assassination. So here's another animation with the Naginata this time. This was another thing I was a little confused about. I was thinking maybe this world, there would be more things to do in between locations, like maybe a random event would happen. Maybe that stuff is possible, but it just wasn't in this preview. I'm not quite sure. Further along, I got surprise attacked by like 10 different shinobi, and these guys throw smoke bombs and throw kunai at you. It's really disorienting, but this is also the perfect opportunity to use the Naginata. This is exactly what it is meant for, and I was able to carve down these guys slowly but surely. Overall, combat impressions for Yasuke, really liked him. He just felt solid. I felt like I understood the move sets and how those weapons worked far more than Naoe. It could just be a preference thing or an experience thing. My personal preference going in, I thought I was going to not like Yasuke's combat, but I definitely preferred his to Naoe. Speaking of, this is when I wanted to switch back to Naoe and get some more time with her. And this is the perfect time to talk about seasons, because as you can tell, the time changes in this cutscene. So sometimes when you switch characters or you progress the story forward, the seasons will change. Seasons are a core mechanic of this game. They completely change the landscape, the NPC behavior, how many scouts you have available to you. It's a way for the game to communicate that time has passed, but also a way to refresh activities, because if you've cleared out a location or a local faction, maybe you've become wanted in a certain castle, all of that stuff is refreshed because time has passed. So there's a lot of stuff going on with this system. If you're wondering why you haven't been seeing a lot of seasonal changes in this preview, we only had access to spring and summer, which it was kind of a bummer. I was glad to see it behind the scenes, but it would have been cool to experience that in the demo that we played. Especially since spring and summer, it's kind of hard to tell the difference. They look pretty similar. Moving along, here's a bit more parkour gameplay. And yeah, I just like how it feels in this game. I love how quick and fluid she is. I think the more I play with it, I'll get a better feel for how to use parkour in certain situations. So I finally reached the point in this main story after following my leads. We know who the noble is. We've got our target. I've been trying to avoid spoilers up to this point, but this is the final mission of this arc. So if you really don't want to see spoilers, accidentally see a name or something like that, then do not watch. So at the end of this story cutscene, you're allowed to pick. Do I want to do this mission as Yasuke or Naoe? But what's interesting is it asks you several times throughout the mission who you want to play as, and it'll be like, this is a stealth section or this is a loud section. I played this entire thing as Naoe by choice, and so that's something you get to decide to do. But I chose her because this is a night mission, man. It's like infiltrating a castle. There's lots of different enemies, and so finally, I'll get to show you guys how stealth works in this game, because I think it's pretty cool. One of the big new stealth features in this game is shadows, and the fact that when you're in the dark, you are covered from enemies. So you can tell how visible you are by looking at this eye icon below the compass at the top of the screen, but also you can see an outline of Naoe when you are invisible or in the darkness. There's an outline, so that's a good indicator. So I marked all my targets with eagle vision and then slowly used this cover, whistled to get this one guy's attention, and got him with a corner assassination. I tried to get out of here, but I forgot the body, so somebody came to investigate. So I ended up doubling back and then going prone on the ground in the darkness until he came into my view and then threw a kunai at his head. During this next part, I isolated this one guard and figured it was safe to go ahead and take him out, but I almost got seen doing some more exploration. Again, I just went prone to the ground and made sure I was in the shadows to stay hidden. During the lead-up missions, we learned that there would be some infiltrators that we needed to take out during the main missions, so that's what you're seeing right now. So I had to kind of study the environment, use my eagle vision, and make sure I could grab this servant and assassinate her while no one was looking. Something interesting I noted, Naoe is so small and frail that it's hard for her to pick up bodies and move them. So if you do want to hide bodies as Naue, just know it's a little more difficult. Progressing further, I stayed in the shadows on the rooftops, and I was completely invisible in most of these sections. My next target was a cook, and this guy was just standing out in the middle of, nowhere, and I was really worried about being seen. Turns out I didn't need to be. Nobody was paying attention to this guy, so I just hopped down and assassinated him. Now, good thing to note in stealth, if you alert part of the castle, it's not going to alarm the entire castle. So if you want to go back into stealth, if you screw up your run, you don't have to start over from the very beginning. Next, I had to let Yasuke in through the gate, and again, the game is like, hey, do you want to play as Naue and Yasuke? I continued to play as Naue. So if this mission is a blueprint for the rest of the main targets in this game, you're going to be able to switch back and forth between Yasuke and Naue. Next, I had to secure this meeting area for our target and take out the attackers that were hiding. So I found this one guy who was hiding under a lamp, and I thought, you know what, I'll throw a kunai to take out the lamp. Unfortunately, that caught his attention, and then he came right to where I was and found me, even though I was completely invisible. So unless this was a glitch, just know that if an enemy knows where something came from, then they can find you even if you're invisible. This led to a really long, frustrating fight with these shinobi that I ultimately lost. Once again, I just felt so outnumbered as Naue. I think I just need to get good. On my second attempt, I had a lot more luck, although I still got into combat, but I think what you need to do as Naue is really lean into your tools. So as you can see here, I threw my smoke bomb during combat and immediately got an assassination on a shinobi. So don't be afraid to use your tools as Naue. For the final target, I just prone walked up to this guy. So when in doubt, just prone and then assassinate in the shadows. It's super easy and satisfying. This was another point where I could switch characters. I decided to stick with Naue and finish the job. Pretty quickly, I got in a fight with these Ronin, and this is finally the point where I felt like Naue's combat worked for me. I was deflecting things, I was dodging out of the way. Maybe it's because these Ronin actually took turns and let me, recover, whereas other enemies I was just getting beaten into the ground. But yeah, I think if you're able to hit the timing right, Naue's combat is definitely satisfying. It's more risk reward, but I think that's what you get with her being a shinobi. Now my mission was to find a way to infiltrate this castle and get inside to the top of the Tenchu and assassinate my target. The only problem was this Tenchu was like a maze, man. I mean, there are so many different trapdoors and ways that you had to go down one floor in order to go up further than you could on another floor. I was talking to the QA demoist that was helping me, and he was like, yeah, it is kind of confusing. Maybe we'll have to work on that. So we'll see. I don't know if anyone else had that experience, but it certainly confused me. Along the way, though, I ran into some interesting stealth gameplay opportunities, like these Nightingale floors. If you move too quickly, they're going to alert nearby enemies, so you have to be very careful. Ultimately, I found my target, and it ended up in a boss fight that was pretty cool, like an interesting, unique move set that I hadn't seen before, and felt like this really epic 1v1. And at the end, they gave me a choice. I was able to kill this target or spare them. I decided to kill him because it felt like the right choice given what this person had done. But yeah, I'm interested to see what are the consequences of that choice and how far does that go. So that was it for the structured narrative content in this game. The last thing they wanted us to check out for sure was the hideout. And it feels like they took all of the ideas from Valhalla and just fleshed them out further. So this is a place that's physical on the map. You can visit it, you can fast travel to it. All of your allies will be here. And they took it a step further. You can actually customize this place like The Sims. I'm talking plop down buildings, rotate them, change the different skins on the buildings. Also, you can put down gravel paths and trees and shrines and animals, all kinds of stuff. Now, to be completely honest, this isn't something that interests me very much. This wasn't something that I was like, yeah, I really needed my Assassin's Creed game. Of course, I am, open to it, but I didn't spend a lot of time exploring this part of the preview. I was more interested in the gameplay side of this. What are the benefits for placing down these buildings? And luckily, there are some. The Forge lets you upgrade weapons and armor to a certain level, and then you can upgrade that building further and add engravings, which are special perks to weapons. So it's a little bit of customization. If you want to add something to a weapon, you can do that. The study lets you recruit new scouts, so you're able to use that scout pulse on the map more often. Then the dojo lets you train allies. So this is what I was talking about earlier. You actually get to recruit some allies and then train them up, and then once you upgrade them, they get new abilities, but also appearances. And that was something that I really enjoyed from like Revelations way back when. It was cool to see a, junior recruit assassin upgrade all the way to a master assassin. Other things you can do around here, there's tons of decorating. All of the Sumie paintings that you collect out in the wild, you can put them on the walls in your hideout. You can have conversations with your allies. These are people that you meet along the way that you can call into battle, but they're also here in your hideout to talk to, and they'll be your companions throughout the story. Finally, there's the Kujikiri, which is a meditation activity. It's basically a rhythm game where you have to press these buttons with the beat, and then once you're done, Naue will have like some sort of revelation. Again, a very vibey activity, very era appropriate. Maybe once the full game comes out, I'll spend more time in my hideout, but yeah, just wasn't a part of the game I was super interested in. For the rest of our time, we were allowed to do whatever we wanted, so I decided to go back into the open world and go down a checklist of items that I wanted to check out. First is I wanted to pull off a double assassination, and the only way you can do that is by equipping the Tonto, and of course you have to have two enemies close to each other. I managed to get these guys next to each other, and here's what it looks like. It looks pretty good. I went back to that temple earlier where I couldn't get those lost scrolls with Yasuke, ended up being able to reach them with Naue, and then got some more double assassinations under my belt, and this one looks a lot more smooth than the last one. I fought a Guardian, which is one of the tougher enemies in the entire game. These hunt you down whenever you're wanted, but for some reason, this guy was just hanging out, so I decided to get a bunch of assassination damage on him, and then slowly but surely I whittled him down and he sort of flopped on the ground and died. I climbed to the top of this mountain in this quarry area, so it was cool kind of parkour to get to the top, and then of course an amazing view from the viewpoint at the very top of this place. I wanted to take on Himeji Castle. Now you guys saw that during the stealth like main mission that we did earlier, but this is just an open world activity. Like you could take on this castle, and there's 5 samurai daisho that you need to kill in order to unlock a chest at the very end with some awesome loot in it. I tried this with Yasuke in the beginning and actually got this insane Kanabo assassination on one of them, so managed to pull that off. And then it just got way too overwhelming. And so I ran away, and then I came back again with Naue later and tried to take out the rest of them. Ultimately, I was not able to kill all 5 daisho. I don't know if anyone at the event was able to either, because it was just like a time-consuming and difficult thing to pull off. But it was a fun challenge. It kept me engaged, and I'm definitely going to try to do that in the full game. Another activity I found was this horse archery, and it's only for Yasuke, because it's only for samurai. So you have to ride this horse and then hit all of the targets in a row. It felt very similar to like the seasonal Valhalla event activities that they gave us in that game that you could do around Ravensthorpe. So that was everything I played in my 6 hours of Assassin's Creed Shadows early. So that was a lot of information, but I want to leave you guys with some overall thoughts. Like, what did I feel after playing this preview? To me, you can very clearly see the direction Shadows is heading in. It's very much like an AC Odyssey spiritual successor in a lot of ways, but in others, it's more of a grounded experience, and it kind of reminds me of Valhalla too. I'm really happy with what they've done with the stealth and the parkour in this game. It feels like they did genuinely go back to those pillars that we used to have and put more of a focus on them, and that was important to me as an old school Assassin's Creed fan. I was surprised at how much I liked the combat. That was something going in that I wasn't super excited for. It didn't really grab my attention, but once I put my hands on the game, I'm excited to explore that part of the game more. What I wasn't super impressed by were these open world activities. Just the things that you were doing outside of the main mission didn't feel very intriguing to me. I was hoping to get distracted more, like go down a rabbit hole in a side quest and, spend 30 minutes doing something interesting. Instead, it felt like I was going from point to point to point to point. That experience might change in the full game. It could have just been the flow of this preview and how restrictive the area that they gave us to explore really felt, but I don't know. I'm going to keep an eye on that for the full release, but if this game is a bunch of temples and shrines and sort of these very culturally appropriate activities, but not super interesting to me, I don't know if that's going to hold my attention for the entire runtime. Like, I can already see that becoming pretty old. Another thing that didn't grab me yet was the story, and I think that's most preview events for me, especially when they jump you around from the prologue to like 20 hours in or however far we are into the game. I didn't really feel an emotional connection to these characters yet, and I'm hoping that I do in the full game. But I will say they might have pulled off this dual protagonist thing. I was really worried that one character wouldn't feel as good as the other one. I didn't find that. I felt that they had their strengths and their weaknesses, and it made sense to jump back and forth between them. That's going to be a player preference thing, and some people might find that a little annoying. They just want to play as Naoe, or they just want to play as Yasuke, but I think this actually works. Ultimately, for me, I think AC Shadows as a whole is going to sink or swim based on whether I can get into a rhythm with this game, you know? Will I get sucked into the gameplay systems and gameplay loops? Is this story going to suck me in and not let go? Am I going to enjoy upgrading my hideout and, you know, training all of my recruits and decorating that thing? The reality is AC Shadows is a big game with a lot of levels and quests and gear to find and things to do. And I can't tell you, nobody can tell you at this point whether or not it's going to overstay its welcome or it's going to be a fun, engaging experience from start to finish. But for now, from the 6 hours I played, AC Shadows is a solid experience with some things I did like and some things I didn't like. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You learned something from, you know, firsthand experience from playing this game. And I want to say thanks to Ubisoft for inviting me out to this preview event. It's always such a good time talking to devs, getting to see the studio where they work. It's like a very meaningful experience for me. And it's also so cool to catch up with creators and meet some that I've never met before. So it's just really cool overall, and I'm very thankful and grateful that I got to do this. That is it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, remember to hit that like button. Also, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and ring the bell so you don't miss my next one. And of course, I will be playing Shadows when it comes out in March. So stay tuned to the channel. You don't want to miss that. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will talk to you next time.